Hi, I'm Amanda Nicole, and I have 7 herbs that I would like to offer you for the 2020 presidential election. I want to tell you that these herbs might be a little unexpected. It might seem at first thought on the matter that a basket full of nervine relaxants might be in order for those of us who are living through or observing the 2020 presidential election here in the United States. But I think that the plants have much deeper, more profound, and effective medicine to offer us at this time. And for myself, when I look at what is happening around me and what is happening to us, for us, through us, with us as a collective, I don't think that offering a candidate or a party or focusing on a particular issue is what would be most helpful at this time coming from me. I think what would be most helpful is plant medicine. So here we go. The first plant that I would like to offer for this 2020 presidential election is rose. Rose is a plant that I have offered many times in classes and in one-on-one consultations when we need to have clear seeing, clear sight. Rose is a plant that has been traditionally used to improve physical eyesight, often, as a rinse, or it can even be taken, as a tincture, as a tea, but really lovely as a rinse. So this is very necessary at this time. I think it is very difficult to see clearly during this season in our country and in the world. There is a great deal that can cloud our vision. There's a lot of fog, there's a lot of mist, there's a lot of illusion, there are blurred lines. And so rose is able to really just put a crystalline, just sharp edge along the lines that we're seeing physically, but also emotionally, energetically, spiritually. One of the things that I have offered rose for, especially when I'm working with trauma or in a relationship setting, is that rose helps us see what we don't want to see. And often, sadly, what we don't want to see is the truth of a matter because it's too painful. So with a particular person or a situation, or maybe even a political party, or a possible outcome in a situation that we're in, we may not want to see the truth of the matter. It's too painful for us. And that's what rose helps us do. Rose helps us see the truth of a matter, of a person, a relationship, a situation, while also holding our heart, comforting it, and letting it know that you're going to be able to handle this. You'll make it through this because I'm here, Rose. I'm here to comfort you, to hold your heart, to mend the places that are going to be or have already been wounded or broken from what you see, what you know. So rose for that, and also rose for unconditional love, particularly with rose, self-love. This is so important because I'm not sure how possible it is to express and show love to the other, to someone outside of us, if we're not feeling that inside, for ourselves. What is inside is what makes its way out of us. Our heart is the root and the source of our actions and our words. So if we are not experiencing love there for the self, it is very difficult for there to be love flowing out for others. We often think that's what's flowing out, but it can often be other things, other things that we call love that may not be that. That might not be actually what is happening. So when we begin to work with rose, we can begin to have self-love, unconditional self-love. There are no requirements or obligations to be loved. You are loved as you are, and then we're able to offer that to others. It naturally flows out because if we, in all of our imperfections, brokenness, are able to love ourselves and be loved and know that we are loved by the divine, then in grace, we're able to offer that to others because we may think that we know other people quite well, but it is ourselves that really we know the most about. Even if we don't know ourselves completely, even if we're still blind to certain parts of ourselves, which Rose can help with, we still know the most about our own inner workings more than the inner workings of others. And so if we're able to accept and love ourselves, it makes it easier for us to accept and love others unconditionally. And I do think at this time, it really doesn't need to be said that there might not be a great deal of love being expressed, being shared, being offered. That is not often what I see flowing through, at least what is presented to us through social media or through television and other media platforms. What is going on personally with one-to-one interactions, that may very well be the case, but what we're being offered on larger, more public platforms like social media and other places, I wouldn't really consider those places to be places of love, the giving and receiving of love at this time. So, Rose, for clear seeing, for seeing the truth of a matter, for seeing a truth that we don't want to see or not ready to see, while also having our hearts held and comforted by Rose and mended from whatever is wounding it, and then unconditional. You don't have to believe this or do that or, in order to be loved. Unconditional, no strings attached, self-love that then we're also able to offer to others. And then looking at my notes, one last piece for Rose before I move to the next plant. Rose is extremely beneficial if there are feelings of betrayal. So some of us at this time may be feeling betrayed. Maybe we're feeling betrayed by our country. Maybe we're feeling betrayed by the divine. Maybe we're wondering why our prayers regarding certain issues and matters haven't yet been answered in this, collective experience that we're having. Maybe we feel betrayed by a candidate. Maybe we feel betrayed by a party. Maybe we feel betrayed by a system. Maybe we feel betrayed by a belief, a document, or other leaders that perhaps are prominent, with certain issues. Or maybe we're feeling betrayed by a friend or a family member in some way connected to what we're experiencing collectively. So, Rose, for feelings of betrayal, to mend those wounds, heal those wounds, and make it so that we will be able to trust again. Maybe not that particular person, system, party, candidate, because maybe they're not trustworthy, but our experience with them will not continue to influence our going forward. We will find a way to trust those things and beings that are trustworthy, that are true. We won't be too guarded, in other words, in a way that is harmful to us in going forward. So, Rose. Second plant that I would like to offer for this 2020 presidential election is rabbit tobacco, and I will, in the show notes, list the names of these plants, and especially their Latin names, because a lot of people will say, well, can that be this? Can that be that? Will this work for this? Will this work for that? And this is especially true with rabbit tobacco. So I want to offer rabbit tobacco, also called sweet everlasting. And what I especially want to offer rabbit tobacco for, that has been such a particular medicine that this plant has offered to me, is this: the ability to discern what is counterfeit. And that's the word that rabbit tobacco likes to use, counterfeit. So what is presenting itself to us as this or that. And yet underneath, it is counterfeit. It is the opposite. This is such a necessary gift. This is such a necessary skill, a necessary way of seeing. It seems like to be able to discern what is counterfeit, because in my experience growing up in the Christian church, one of the phrases that would be used is that they would say like the devil or Satan, darkness, evil, would present itself as an angel of light. Another way that we might think of that is the idea of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Here's the thing though, we don't know that necessarily right away. You know, our first impression, that first glance, we have a sheep. We have an angel of light. It's with a different way of seeing that we see what is actually underneath. We begin to notice, sort of like, what is it? Little Red Riding Hood when she goes to see her grandmother. And suddenly she starts to think, things are a little off with my grandmother. And she says, Grandmother, what big eyes you have. What big ears you have. What a big nose you have. What big teeth you have. Sometimes in some of the stories, you know, it even mentions the voice doesn't quite sound like her grandmother's, you know. So there begins to be this, you know, ability to see and discern that something is not quite right here, until with rabbit tobacco, the veil, this is very important with rabbit tobacco, the veil is completely lifted and you see what is behind it. And you realize that what you have in front of you now is the truth of the matter that was presenting itself in a counterfeit way. This is so important with rabbit tobacco. And with the rabbit tobacco, a bit of research and reading might need to be found to know the best ways to work with it, but you can find it out in nature and you can sit with it and be with it. Maybe a rabbit tobacco flower essence. Some people use dried rabbit tobacco in sleeping pillows, especially for people that have asthma and other sorts of respiratory difficulties. You could also simply pull up a picture of it on your computer and sit with that image. Sit with it and just listen. So any way that you would want to bring it in, maybe you would just want to write the name on a piece of paper, rabbit tobacco, and sit and just open yourself up to being shown what or who is counterfeit. Another aspect that I would like to offer for rabbit tobacco that is connected back to the idea of the veil being lifted is that rabbit tobacco is a plant for liminal spaces, for the in-between time. This is why it's connected to journey work or shamanism. That was one of the reasons that it was called rabbit tobacco, is that they were saying this was the tobacco for the rabbits. This is what the rabbits would come to in order to journey, to meet with the Great Spirit. So this in-between place, this is most certainly where we are and have been for quite some time. There's really no way to look at our current situation in the world, and then particularly here in the United States, and not realize that we are in an in-between time, a liminal space between before and after, and in a way that perhaps we never have been. That's always happening. We're always existing in an in-between space, and especially when it comes to things like a presidential election. There is always the day before the election, there is always the day after the election. There is always when this person was president and then when this person is president. There is always the space in between. So rabbit tobacco helps us to exist in that in-between space and to navigate that in-between space. Also, rabbit tobacco is connected to the respiratory system. Just, you know, a plant par excellence for those suffering from asthma and bronchitis and other really deep and even chronic issues with the lungs, with the breath, and with breathing. And so it is also then connected to grief. One of the aspects of rabbit tobacco is that it has connections to the ancestors or to those that have already passed over, those who have already died and gone before us. And so there is a connection there to grief and to grieving. There's just no question that as a collective and then also as individuals, we are grieving. Again, we could be grieving so many things. One of them could be what was mentioned with Rose, betrayal that we may have experienced, or maybe some of us have already begun to see what is counterfeit, or we've already begun to see what we didn't want to see, and we're grieving. We're grieving the loss of something. We're grieving the loss of a person, a way of life, a belief system, a trust, a relationship that was deeply important to us. And so rabbit tobacco can help us begin to work with that. Also, this wasn't in my notes, but it's coming, and I love it when that happens. Rabbit tobacco is a rabbit medicine, and I do think that rabbit medicine often gets a bad rap. I think that rabbit medicine is actually extremely powerful. Often, it will just get connected to a little twitchy, scared rabbit. But there's really so much more to rabbit medicine than that, as we see with the idea of being able to reveal what is counterfeit. That is powerful. So I do want to take a moment, though, to pay attention to the aspect of rabbit medicine that is connected to fear. There is fear. People are feeling fear. The collective is experiencing fear. And so rabbit tobacco begins to help us work with that. What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of it? It begins to calm and soothe the nervous system. Sometimes with rabbits, that fear that triggers their, the autonomic nervous system, that idea of fight or flight, and they will freeze, but they will flee. And sometimes in fleeing the predator, they can run with such vigor, to use that word with the rabbits, to escape the danger that their own flesh can begin to tear, or sometimes their hearts can stop because of the exertion, because of the fear. So rabbit tobacco can come in and can bring calmness, calming the nervous system, and also beginning to help you work with who or what you're afraid of and why. And I believe in working with rabbit tobacco, because of the powerful medicine that it is, face it and overcome it. I do want to say before moving on, which I should have said at the beginning, that rabbit medicine is often trickster medicine. So that is most definitely a connection there with being able to reveal to us what is counterfeit. Okay, next plant. Blueberry. Blueberry was not originally on this list, but one morning recently when I woke up in that liminal space between waking and sleeping, blueberry came specifically for this video and for this plant medicine offering. So this is how it was offered to me. And if you guys have heard me teach on blueberry or watched previous videos or listened to podcasts or been in classes or signed up for my newsletter and gotten the spiel I give on blueberry, then you will know that I connect blueberry with home, most definitely, but also with the idea of transcending this realm, this plane. And so by that, what I'll offer is that for me, blueberry came, and by helping me to understand my true essence, because blueberry in indigenous languages, in the Ojibwe with men, the essence is a medicine of essence. So in helping me to understand what is my true essence, it helps me to transcend certain ways of viewing myself here in this world. And it did it particularly for me when it came to relationships to family. So we will often view ourselves as the daughter of, our mother, or our father's daughter, or part of a family line or lineage. And so we will feel held to all the obligations that come to that, and also all of the dynamics and maybe even sometimes sadly, conscious or otherwise, you know, manipulations that may come with those relationships and just ways of feeling obligated in those ways. So this can be true not only in a family, although some of us may be experiencing that during this election season, but we can also experience it if we're part of a party or if we're part of a certain social justice movement or a particular cause, or we live in a particular place. You know, we can feel that we have an obligation to do this or that thing to be in keeping with this particular group or tradition or line or lineage. Because if we don't, you know, we'll be excluded or ostracized, or they'll become angry with us, or there'll be other, you know, difficulties or repercussions if we don't keep these obligations and fall in line. And what Blueberry helps us do is not to erase those connections, you know, especially when it comes to family and those sorts of ways of being. Those are true. You are your mother's daughter. You are your father's daughter. Other connections we may be able to step out of. We may be able to move to a different place or not continue to be part of a particular organization or cause. But some things, they are so. But what Blueberry helps do is remind you of your true essence, which is a child of God, a child of the divine, directly connected, nothing between you and God, the divine source. This is who you are. As it said, again, for me and my upbringing and way of being in the world, made in the image of God. You are an emanation. You are an embodiment of God. You are an expression of the divine. And we forget that, and we begin to connect our allegiances, might be a good word, connect those allegiances to people or places or organizations on this plane exclusively. And we forget that we actually, our being, the truth of us actually transcends this. Ultimately, we are children of God. Ultimately, we are made in the image of the divine. We are more. We are not less, but we are more than this body, this place, this family, this connection, this way of being in the world. And so when we're able to tap into that, tap into our true essence, our true being, and transcend being sort of suppressed and held down simply here, we are able to make decisions and go forward in a truer, freer way. So we don't make decisions based on obligation. We make decisions based on truth, our true essence. And that true essence is connected to the divine source. So this is wonderful because this is pure. What is happening here is not always pure. This is pure, you know? And so then we can make decisions based on what is true and loving and good and real, rather than being forced or manipulated, again, consciously or otherwise, through a sense of obligation. I also feel that Blueberry, again, as being that medicine of home, is so important because maybe you don't really feel at home right now in this country. Maybe you don't feel at home in your state or in your city. Maybe you don't even feel at home in your family because of the issues and themes and topics and emotions that are being brought up at this time. But you can know that you have home right here. You're always at home because you are always connected to your place of origin. Your place of origin is always right here. and it is a divine place. You are a emanation, a creation of, a breathing out of the divine source, the very beginning, of all things. That is who you are. And so I think that's so helpful because we do live in this world. We do have bodies. We are here. And we have work to do here and relationships to engage in and ways of being here. But it is very good to remember just how big and wide and expansive we actually are, and that there really is more to you, to your neighbor, to your family member, to this country than this moment, than this place in time and space. There is so much more. And so sometimes, even while we're engaged in this moment, in this point in time and space, to just reach out and remember, that there is more. And then we don't have to, hopefully, maybe feel as much discouragement or hopelessness or despair, if that's what we're feeling or will be feeling, perhaps, after the election results are in, if things don't go the way that maybe perhaps we're hoping in our hearts. And it also helps us to, be hopeful that there is more outside of this really tangible, hands-on, matter form way of being. And that gives us hope too. That gives us hope too that it's not just the physical form that we might be able to receive hope and help from. Also the unseen and the spirit form. Okay, next plant. Blue vervain. This is a plant. I had a friend who is an herbalist, and she said she thought the whole world needed blue vervain. And she said this several years ago, and I can't even imagine, that thought of hers would have changed at this point. It's probably increased. So blue vervain is a lovely plant that you would want to use as a tincture. As a tea, it would be quite bitter. Or again, you can simply sit with the plant or look at a picture of it or work with a flower essence. Just a side note before I go forward, blueberry is lovely as a cordial. Blueberry, brandy, and honey. This is very good. Okay, so with blue vervain, one of the ways that it works is for people who have very high standards. Now, one of the ways that I offer this in my classes and in my consultations is that high standards are not necessarily bad. It's good for us to have standards or goals that we want to reach or that we want to attain. But sometimes we set goals for ourselves or for others, or we have standards for ourselves or for others that aren't reasonable. They're not reasonable, especially during certain seasons of our lives or for that particular person. Maybe that set of standards or goals would be reasonable and attainable for this individual, but not this one because of whatever their gifts or talents or abilities are or their circumstances or whatever. So an example I often give in my classes is I use blue vervain very specifically for those that are struggling with postpartum depression. And so this is like such an important time where there are standards that are just not attainable at this time. So in the circles that I have moved in with midwifery and whatnot, so the woman might want to, nurse the baby exclusively, use cloth diapers, puree the child's food, be making bone broth, eating everything local and organic, keeping the house clean and spotless, maybe also while taking care of some chickens, maybe while making some herbal medicine, maybe she even blogs, maybe she even just thinks every day she will be taking a shower or continuing her previous workout routine or getting dressed and ready by a certain time, and then also hosting and entertaining friends and running errands the way that she did before the baby came. All of this in the days and weeks and early months, maybe longer, after the baby is born. And then women wonder why, they're experiencing the exhaustion and depression that they are. Those are lovely goals and wonderful standards that maybe would be possible at another season of life, not this one. And for some of us, they might not ever be reasonable, attainable goals. They're not who we are, you know? And so I offer it in that way. So that's an example. So this is why I think blue vervain is such an important plant for the 2020 presidential election. The standards may be too high that we're placing on ourselves and on others. They may not be reasonable for that particular person, including ourselves, or for that party, or even for that system. And this might be a lot for me to say, and to be received, but to put on one person or two people the responsibility of correcting and righting everything that's out of balance, everything that's out of order in our world, in our culture, in our society, that is a burden that no human should be required to carry, regardless, really, I think, of who they are, or is able to carry. If we are thinking that way, we are asking someone to take on the missteps, mistakes, or worse of hundreds of years of other people's behavior. We just simply can't let that rest on them. So this is important. I think it's also important because maybe you're feeling yourself that you've got to do this, you've got to post, you've got to talk, you've got to say, you've got to canvass the neighborhood, you've got to put out the signs, you've got to make the phone calls, you've got to have that conversation with your friend, have that conversation with your family members, you've got to wear the button, you've got to vote early, I've got to watch this, I've got to do that, because it matters and it's important and my vote matters and it's all on me. And I don't say that to present it as prideful or egotistical, but really passionate. Maybe you greatly desire to see change in the world. Dear friend, it is not all on you, and you do not have to exhaust yourself to the point of maybe even just physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually harming yourself. This is not all on you. Lovely message of Blue Vervain that I received one time from her. You have done enough. You don't have to do another thing. I mean, how many of us desperately have needed to hear that or need to hear that right now? You have done enough. You don't need to do another thing. So for those of you that are like strung out on what that next post will be like, maybe just go outside or just take a nap or eat something or post a cat meme. It is okay, because all of this is not on you. Often when I offer Blue Vervain, I offer for people who feel really severe tension in the neck and in the shoulders, to the point sometimes of even spasming, where they're not able to even move their neck, and this is because there is a great burden, a great weight that they're carrying, often from their to-do list or expectations they have for themselves or that others have placed on them. It is a burden. So Blue Vervain is very lovely for helping us to lay down that burden, or the things that really aren't ours to carry, because some things, they really aren't ours to carry. I'd also like to offer Blue Vervain for overexertion, especially as one of my favorite herbalists and first teachers offered, Matthew Wood, strong above, weak below. So strong above, like mind and heart, just so much passion and so many ideas, but weak below, like the gut and the reproductive system. And so what happens is there's not the stamina, the support there to bring to fruition or manifestation, all of the passionate ideas and ways of being and expressions that are kept, in the heart and in the mind. And often if people are able to do that, if they, push to express and do and be all of that, then they end up just collapsing from exhaustion, just from complete overexertion, great exertion. So some other practical ways of thinking of that would be a move, a cross-country move, or maybe a move in the same city, birth, enormous exertion, a big project at work, or a very full and stressful season at school, a semester. You finish it and then you wonder why. You just like pass out and you don't have like the passion or the ability to act on those things as you did before. You need some blue vervain. So I want to offer blue vervain to us in that way. Turn my notes over. Next plant I'm wanting to offer for you, I hope you're still with me and that these are helping in some way, is holly. Holly, definitely for me in this situation, I would use as a flower essence. I'm speaking particularly with my experience with American holly, but Matthew Wood, who I mentioned a moment ago, and others have worked with other species of holly, but this is the one that I'm with. And if you'd like to learn more about holly and bat medicine and its connection to what's currently happening in the collective, especially here in the US, COVID election, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to, I believe it's a free class that you can watch where Matt and I discuss holly and bat medicine. Interesting, if you take a look, it is the bat that is on the 2020 US quarter at this time, and I don't think that's really by accident at all. Okay, so holly, lots could be said about this plant, really all of them. You're welcome to listen to my podcast if you want more medicine that's connected to holly, blueberry, blue vervain. But in this case, what I want to present for holly is that it is heart opening, and in a way that I have not experienced with any other plant for the heart. You know, and there's so many, rose, hawthorn, so many. But holly will literally, like, it's almost like surgery, will go in to remove what is inside of the heart that is keeping it from being able to open and to love. And you know, what's often in there, besides the hurt or the betrayal and whatnot that Rose and others would be mending, sometimes we have like dark places in our hearts, particularly jealousy, envy, bitterness, malice, where we're keeping grudges and, you know, maintaining a list of wrongdoing. Blue vervain is helpful for that too. For people who keep lists, Matthew would mention a client who kept lists of other people's wrongs. So definitely a connection there. So this is what holly does. I mean, this is what I would say about holly that happened to me. I don't know if everyone that I've offered it to, which has been a few, I take care, split my heart wide open. And I was able to feel like I haven't ever felt with any sermon that I've listened to, with any other plant that I've been with, just any other way of being with God, with the divine. I felt and experienced pure, unadulterated, untainted, divine love. And it was exquisitely beautiful, just beautiful. And was told that I am always held in that, can tap into it at any time. I just forget. But then also, it gives the capacity to be able to then give that yourself, because now you feel it, you're conscious that you're in it, and it can flow through you, and you can be the embodiment of divine love and expressing divine love in the world. This is, I don't want to say it's beyond Rose, but it's beyond Rose with what is possible with love, what it's wanting to express when it comes to love. I'm sort of putting blueberry, rose, and holly all together. It's like transcending even unconditional love, just transcending even that. This is very much needed for this reason. Another aspect of holly medicine, it is bat medicine, and part of that is to recognize Duality, recognize it. Know that it's here. You could also say polarity. These two extremes, this is part of duality. And so this is what is extraordinary to me about Holly, is to be able to see another person and know what they believe, don't believe, do, don't do, say, don't say, like really, really see as much as any human can their faults, their shortcomings, the parts of them that need healing or mending or transforming or integrating. You know what I mean? This is a part of all of us. And you see it and you know it. And yet Holly has opened your heart so much that you just reach out and you gather all of that in and say, I know, and I love you. I love you. I know. This is otherworldly and incredibly necessary, especially for us right now at this time in the world, at this time in this country, and with this election. It's a true thing, friends. No one is ever going to think exactly the way you think, do exactly what you do, say exactly what you say. You're never going to be point for point with someone. There are likely always going to exist people that literally feel like, and perhaps are, in some ways, as you're perceiving and viewing them, your complete opposite. That's how you will think and feel about them. And you just think, ne'er the twain shall meet. We're not coming together. We're so different, right? And so what happens? We separate, and sometimes there's even like a repelling, or this is what happens, right? Or I see like deer or elk or moose, locking antlers. This is what happens, right? Or complete separation. What if it were possible to see and recognize that, and then just be able to hold it and love it, and not, this is really hard to say, not think it is your job or your duty to change it, only to love it. Love is what does the changing. Love is what does the transforming. Love is what does the healing. Separation, locking horns, butting heads, that's not what does it. That just makes hearts more closed and defensive and wounded, and makes for more trauma and more rawness and more sensitivity and more defensiveness, and on and on and on and on. Love is what transforms. Love is what changes things. That's what does it. And so if you are able to do that, and in doing it, like I said, you don't say, oh, everything you do is good. No, you hold it and say, I know, I see, and I love you. This is so important because when it comes to bat medicine, we flip our perspective, because we might be sitting here thinking, well, that person really needs me to do that for them. But you really need them to also do that for you. That is the change in perspective. We need to do this for one another, and our love for one another will transform and change us as individuals, and so change us as a collective. That's what will happen. And that doesn't mean everyone will end up being the same. Diversity is wonderful and beautiful, but we can all begin to move towards coming to a place where whatever it is that we're doing and saying and being has its root and its source in true, pure, unadulterated, untainted, crystal clear, divine love. And so then whatever needs to go will go, and whatever can remain in that space will remain. This is an important medicine for this time. I would also just note, as I said, that it is very helpful and is sort of packaged and advertised like in this way. I don't like those words for it though. by Bach flower essences for jealousy, envy, malice, bitterness, all those sorts of things. So it really gets at sort of the other side of the coin, so to speak, of, well, what is the opposite of divine love? And that's what we would have there. Ownership, control, possession. Those are the other things. All right, so that's 5. 2 more, if you're still with me. I want to offer pine. I'm speaking particularly in my experience with white pine for a particular reason, which I'll bring up in a moment, but you're welcome to work with other pine medicines. You can use it as a tea. You can simply be out with a pine tree and smell it. You know, you can have a tincture, whatever. There's lots of ways to work with pine safely and effectively. So pine, shame, guilt, helping to remove feelings of shame and guilt, particularly actually as connected to religion, false teachings that are in religion that might occasion you carrying around the baggage of shame and guilt. But shame and guilt, so this is important. Here's a few reasons for why that might be important right now. Perhaps you feel responsible in some way for the state of our world and for the state of our country, our system. Maybe you feel somewhat responsible that you've contributed to hurt or disruption or division or pain. Maybe you really have, maybe you really haven't. I don't know. You don't have to carry around this burden of shame and guilt. You don't have to. You can lay that down. You can be cleansed. This is one of the lovely parts of pine medicine, is a cleansing. Just crystal clear, white as snow, crisp winter air, clear as a bell, cleansing. And so you do not have to walk around with shame and guilt for what you have done or think you have done or have been accused of doing, even falsely accused. Also, I think that there is a lot of shaming going on with social media and in personal conversations, public conversations, just an enormous amount of speech that is communicating to other people that you are shameful, full of shame. No. Mm-mm. Even though there have been some really disgusting, grotesque things that have been done in our world, in our country, that is true and that is real. But there is a way to speak the truth in love, not to speak the truth in shame. We speak the truth not only in substance, but in manner to heal rather than to hurt or cut, really punishing. Blue vervain has such a connection to that, where we find ourselves just lashing out at other people, trying to punish them, often though because of what we're actually feeling about ourselves in here, and instead of turning it in, we turn it outward. That's part of blue vervain's picture. So pine. Also with pine, especially white pine, so you have 5 needles, that are all gathered together. And this is part of what pine has taught me, bringing it all together. Even think of that sticky sap, bringing all of the pieces together, gathering up those pines. And there is an indigenous story of the idea of burying the hatchet. These tribes coming together, these people groups coming together of the indigenous nations and burying the hatchet under a pine tree and coming together. Like, the hatchet needs to be buried on so many levels, and there needs to be a coming together, a bringing together of community, of people. And how to do that can just seem completely outside of our knowing. But it is possible, and I believe that to begin to work with the plants in this energetic, emotional, spiritual way opens doors, because it begins to open our hearts. It begins to open our minds. It begins to clear away things that are in the way, whether it's of our seeing, of our loving, of our speaking true things, which we'll get to in a moment. So this is another aspect of pine. And pine is also, like rabbit tobacco, connected to the lungs and to grief. I do also want to say, just taking a little step back, to blueberry. It is also connected to rose with improving vision, particularly night vision, which is also a lovely connection to holly and the bat, because blueberry specifically helps to improve night vision, seeing in the dark. And it can appear to be quite dark at the moment, but it is possible to see clearly in the dark. So I want to offer some of those little tidbits as I'm finishing up the pine offering. Last plant, plant number 7. Hawthorn, the hawthorn tree. Use the leaf, the flower, the berries, make yourself a cordial, a jam, a tincture, a tea. Use the flower essence all the way. Sit with the plant, draw a picture, pull one up on your computer, however you want to work with it. A heart medicine, no question asked. It is a heart medicine. But what I particularly want to offer it as medicine for, and this is presented where I received it from, on Sean Donahue's blog. He's an herbalist who wrote a blog post about hawthorn years ago that's been so helpful to me. And so he talks about how hawthorn is, as most of you might know, a fairy tree. And so when the world began to change and blades and industrialization and all that began to come in, the elementals and the fairies began to flee, and they fled into the hawthorn groves for protection until it was safe enough to come out again. And so this whole world that existed, before this age we live in now, after the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, where so much of spirit and the unseen has been removed from the world, there was this world that existed before ours where things were looked at and experienced so differently. And the world of the fairies, of the elementals, of this connection to the spirit and the unseen, and moving through the world in a way where everything is alive, and everything is connected to us and a part of us. And that world now would appear to have been and has been lost. It is a lost world to us. And there are many lost worlds that we can experience, especially here in the United States. The lost world of the indigenous people that were here before the colonizers came. This is a lost world. We aren't ever going to return to what was here before. Or in our country, those who were brought over as slaves. Black people, brown people, others that came here to be slaves, that have, their whole identity and history and ancestry erased because they were just stolen. No records, nothing true or real or good kept for them. And so lost worlds. I don't know where I came from. I don't know the particular country of origin, for my family. I don't know the name of my great-great-great-great-grandfather or whatever. There's no way to go back. It is a lost world, and those ways of being are lost. And so hawthorn is a plant, again, for grief, for the heart, but not just any grief, a grief where a world has been lost world. And even now, as we're moving through 2020, we've lost the world we lived in before, even with all of its imperfections and things that needed to change. It's lost. And perhaps after the election, we will experience that again in another way. Another world has been lost. And this is a great, deep grief that hawthorn can touch on. When you are grieving the loss of a world that you can't get back. It's not retrievable. Here's the other lovely flip side of hawthorn that's so necessary and that I love. You don't have to sit in that space just grieving that lost world. Hawthorn will support you in feeling and moving through and expressing the grief so that you can then begin to imagine and create a new one. This is the way that it is. Cycles. What new world will you create? What new world can you now imagine? What is now possible? Maybe you will bring some elements of that old world into the new. But it is not simply that we're wanting to bring the old and be old again, because there are good things about the current world we live in and the world that is to come. So we bring the best of that world and combine it with the best of this world and imagine the best that we don't even know yet and create a new world. So there's hope here. There's hope here, and strength and imagination and ability and facilitating the creation of a new world, a new earth, a new way of being. Okay, I hope that all of these were helpful to you and that you're able to gather some medicine from them. I'll put the names of these plants underneath. If you have questions about how to work with these plants, you're welcome to email me and ask, or put it in the comments below. I'll put my contact information there. And then if any of this has been helpful to you at all, share it. Repost the video, email it to a friend, tag someone, and just spread the medicine, because I feel we're all deeply and greatly in need of something that can really get at what we're needing to get at, the root of what is happening with us, among us, to us, between us, and really bring true shifts and changes and transformations and returning to a centeredness and a well-being and a wholeness that we're really feeling like has been lost, because it has, and we need help returning and finding our way. So I hope these plants have been good to you, and that you're able to work with all or some or one of them, and that they help you move through this season. And I'd really love to hear, if you work with any of these plants in any way, how they bless you, how they benefit you, and what shifts and changes you see that you're able to experience in your own person, maybe your family, your community, however you see the medicine of these plants flowing out into you and into the world around you. Okay, bye now.